Hello from the SDG Media Zone in Davos. We have a panel to talk about communications for climate action, and I'm joined by Swedish designer Jakob Trollback, the founder of the new division and the Trollbäck+Company. And we have also Neira, the Director for Public Health and Environment at the World Health Organization. Welcome to both of you. I'm Martina Donlan from the United Nations Global Communications Department, and my job actually is to communicate the Sustainable Development Goals. So I have to start with Jakob and ask you, as the creator of this great branding, how did you take something as complex as the Sustainable Development Goals and make them so accessible, so compelling?
I think the key was that when I got the document from the UN, I didn't quite understand it, and so it was a journey to understand what it was about. And some of the goals, I can say that about half of the names was names for the goals that I just written down to understand what it was, and then we also wanted to change the perspective a little bit because there was a lot of ending this, and I was thinking we should project forward to 2030 and say that 2030 there is no hunger, there is no poverty, etc. So we started by just thinking about what the wordings would be for it, and then we tried to make it as simple as possible so that it would be just names, sort of headlines for what these goals were. And then once we understood how the goals were grouped, it got much easier to start to think about symbols for them. So it came from just making the language much easier to understand. And that, of course, I have a long background in branding and advertising. And that's sort of what you do there. You make sure that the messages are as easily understood as possible. So, and then I can say that it was also clear after a while that the 17 goals aren't actually, in a sense, not goals. They're categories, because the real goals are in the 169 targets. So if you think about them as setting headlines for a lot of action that is clearly defined in the targets, then you have a pretty good start to create a system that's easier to understand.
And now, of course, you also help companies communicate sustainability, and you do anything from branding to campaigns. So I want to come back to you later and talk a little more about how we take these goals now and create content that actually moves people and inspires action. But first, WHO, how do you communicate for climate action? I mean, health and climate, obviously there's a strong link there.
We changed completely our approach to communicate about climate change and health. And we did that because we realized that people were focusing very much on next generation glaciers and melting of those glaciers and polar bears. And like you, we were thinking this is too complicated for people to make the connection between climate change and our health. But then we started to see that most of the causes that are responsible for the global warming are as well responsible for air pollution. And for us, air pollution is killing 7 million every year, 7 million premature deaths every year. That's the message. Look at your lungs. So we're telling people, whenever they talk about climate change, put the polar bear, put the planet, but put as well a couple of lungs. And then you will have a better picture of what climate change means to you. So I'm very happy that you put it on the SDG 3, the one on health. You put an electrocardiogram, which is very medical oriented, but it keeps us very much focused on health. But at the same time, you have a little heart. And this is where we want to focus. So it's not all about treating diseases. It's very much about preventing those diseases. And if you tackle the causes of climate change, the incredible benefits you can have for the health of the people are amazing. I mean, the whole Paris Treaty is nothing else than a public health treaty. They don't know it, but we know it. So if we implement the Paris Treaty, the health benefits will be incredible. So our communication has definitely changed a lot put health at front, and then people will understand. Put asthma, use asthma, and this visualize immediately for people that if they breathe toxic air, then I know what I am feeling. Well, if you tell them about climate change and health, it will take a while to understand. But if you say, if you breathe toxic air, and unfortunately millions and millions of people today around the world are breathing this very toxic air, they know very well what that means and how they are coughing and how they are suffering and how they are having asthma cases around them, and then lung cancer if you are exposed for a long time, and then they really understand that language very well. But we wanted to do it in positive. We don't want to communicate apocalyptic things or negative ones, yes.
Right, we have to make it personal, speak to how it concerns people directly, but then create the positive narrative of what are the solutions out there, what action can they take. We don't want people to feel completely disempowered and hopeless, so how do you do that, Jakob?
It's one of the hardest things to deal with, because we gotta have the basic idea that we can fix all of these things. Otherwise, nothing is going to happen. The reason why we have to fix it is because the consequences are really dire. So it's a balancing act on communicating how important it is with action, and it's important because of a reason, and that's the reason, obviously, that we know that Greta is talking about all the time. At the same time, there is a danger that people get paralyzed and think that, well, we're going to hell anyway. So, but at any time, you need to think about consequences. And I think that maybe if you look at the world, and the Western world especially, we have developed the world as if there were no consequences of anything. Like, we've been thinking about the nature as that's just going to be there, and that's just too vast for us to affect that. But when it comes to other things in our lives, we know they have consequences. We know that smoking has consequences to our health, even if many people ignore that too. But the balance between really saying that the consequences are dire, but that we can avoid them, that's where we have to be somewhere. Because I don't believe there's a lot of messaging that is together we can fix this, hooray, hooray, and it's more serious than that. And I think that the issues we have are extremely, they have extreme consequences for the whole future of humanity. So it's hard to say that just together we're going to fix this and join us for this and that. There's got to be some serious part of it, because there are serious consequences of this.
And we have only 10 years left to achieve the global goals by the 2030 target. So the Secretary General has called for a decade of action, mobilizing everybody everywhere. How does WHO approach this decade of action?
Yeah, I fully agree with you. We need to balance these negative consequences with a positive approach. But of course, avoiding as well this naivete of saying, together we can do it, lovely and all of that. No way. So what we are doing in WHO is, 90% of the global population is breathing now air that is not good for your health. Therefore, we need to work with mayors. Dear mayors, if you do some actions to promote sustainable transport, look at the number of deaths you could reduce. That's a message that combines the deaths with how, if you take the right action, you can decrease that number of deaths caused by air pollution. And your citizens will vote you. Third, a little combination as well of legislation. We hope that one day the politicians will not be able to say, I didn't know it, that air pollution was killing people. So that's why we need to keep saying how many deaths air pollution is causing every year. But at the same time, we need to apply some legislation and saying, okay, those are WHO standards for air quality, you have to endorse it. Otherwise, you are paying a price that one day your citizens might ask you, or maybe the court will ask you to respond to that. Then we need to empower, and we are doing it more and more, the public health community, the health community. We have now pediatricians not only treating the kids with asthma, but they are going out publicly and saying, hey, the reason why there is an increase on asthma cases is because those kids are going back after I treat them to an environment where they cannot breathe. So we are working with the urban planners, we are working with the guys who are doing new buildings in order to make more creativity and energy efficiency, and we will love to work with innovative and creative people, because you are moving as well the way people visualize and will be stimulated to have action. But we are convinced that the health argument might be the one that will change completely the speed and the level of ambition on action, because nothing will mobilize people more than their own health. I mean, my lungs and my cardiovascular system as well, and my brain, because it's affected by air pollution. So combining all of that, maybe we can create this very positively aggressive movement on generating some action, motivated by the fact that, as you rightly say, there are already consequences that we need to tackle.
And Jakob, maybe a last word on how communications can help drive the changes we need to see on climate, on health, on all of the goals.
I think that what we haven't talked so much about is that if you're looking at the 17 global goals and then you look at all of the targets, you actually have a complete map. I would say an almost complete map of all the problems we have in the world, and I think that that's a very educational system, and I think if we're gonna reach 2030 and reach the goals by 2030, there needs to be more knowledge about the targets, and I think that that's something that because that was our second project after we did the 17 goals, that we did all of the 169 targets, and this is something that I think that is instrumental for change. So we've created the same iconic language for all of the targets, and we've put headlines for them also. So if you take, for example, gender equality, we all know how important it is for us to be able to fix this planet. We can't have men dominating the discussions anymore. We need to have different perspectives on it. How many people know what the targets under gender equality is? It's very few, and there are, because there is a target for no discrimination of women. There's not one for no violence against women. There's one against child marriage and genital mutilation. There's targets for unpaid work at home. There are targets for financial resources to women. There are targets for technology support for women. And there are very detailed steps here. And it's all in the targets. And I think that it's a mistake that many people do, that they say that, okay, let's just push out these 17 goals, and the targets, that's just too much for people to deal with, because it's 169 and that's very scary. But this is really where you can find enthusiasm for things, because there is one target against corruption. There is one target for plastic in the oceans. There is one target for sustainable tourism. There is targets for everything, I would say. And these targets, I think we should try to get them out and try to get people to understand them, because that's in the end where the action is. And it's very encouraging to look at them and realizing that the agenda isn't just a feel-good agenda. It has real action points on it. So I'd say these 10 years, which actually technically is 11 years, right? Because the goals go to December 31st, 2030. So we do have 11 years left, even though a decade sounds really great. But we're going to need to work with the targets. And there's enough people in the world to focus on all of the targets. Actually, if you divide it, it's 40 million people that can work on every target, approximately. So that's what I would say. Study up on the targets and find the thing that you're passionate about, and find other people, join them, and do like Greta. Make a noise about it.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jakob, Trollback, Maria, Neira. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Very nice.
Very nice.